Hey, welcome back to the Match Ball Grid. My name is Andre. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Station 1, which is the newest data pack. It just came out last Thursday, and it's the second data pack in the Red Sand cycle, which means we are still hanging out on Mars. And we got 20 cards in here. I think it's 9 runner, 11 corpse, so let's just jump right in. We're going to start on the runner side. So yeah, these cards are actually, at least the card arts, aren't on Netrunner DB just yet. So we're doing things a bit differently. We got these like large scans of these cards, and we're gonna be just working off them. It's a bit different than what we normally do, but these might be actually easier to read. So let's try it out, I guess. And this is where we start. This is an Anarch piece of hardware. It's 2 credits to install. It's 4 influence, which is incredible. And it's a cybernetics piece of hardware. It's a subtype we've sort of seen before. And it has a simple enough ability, I guess. It says click, make a run on R&D or HQ, and trash 2 or more cards from your grip. Whenever you access cards from that server, access 1 additional card for every 2 cards trashed. So basically, throw cards from hand, see more cards, on both HQ or R&D, depending on where you're going. When I originally saw this card when it was spoiled, I was a bit confused, and I think the templating on here is kind of messy. I'm pretty sure cards like this normally say whenever you access cards for that server, access 1 additional card for every 2 cards trashed for the remainder of the run. Like, I think that this card might be missing that. And that's what people weren't aware of, is how long this ability lasts for. It's for the remainder of this run. That was clarified in the UFAQ. But that's that. I don't know whether that's something that you should have been able to tell, or whether that's actually sloppy templating. Talking about sloppy templating, mind you, this is a cybernetics piece of hardware. We've seen cybernetics before. These are all the cybernetics cards, and they came out in the Sand cycle, all in the same pack actually. And cybernetics cards had this like really cool theme. They were hardware upgrades to generally your body, and you took damage when you installed them, and then they gave you a cool ability. And this card doesn't fit that like formula too strictly. It does have the same kind of idea: do damage, get something good out of it. And by damage, this one means throw cards out of your hand. Now, these also came with Chrome Parlor, which is a location that prevents all the brain damage and meat damage from installing cybernetics, and this card's actually entirely useless against Severnius, which is kind of in some ways a bummer, even though Chrome Parlor is not a very exciting card, because they just don't work at all together. And this is where I noticed this thing. This says prevent all meat damage and brain damage from installing cybernetics, plural, while all these cards that came out before have the subtype cybernetic, singular. So FFG actually invented an additional subtype in their hardware cards just because they didn't proofread their stuff, which is not entirely surprising considering how the last cycle has been going in terms of proofreading. But this is a total bummer and actually might need explanations in UFAQs, considering this card here has cybernetics plural, and that's like, it's all bold, so it's not sure whether it means plural cybernetic cards or does it mean cybernetics cards. It's kind of a mess, but I don't think it's actually that important in this instance. So what does this card do? Throw out cards, see extra cards. And multi-accesses on R&D or HQ is actually not something Anarchs have classically struggled with, just because they have access to the cards like Medium and and Nerve Agent. And Medium's the best multi-access card in the game, as far as I'm considered. You put this down for 3 credits, so 1 credit more than hardware than the Severnius Stim Implant. It does take up MU. Yes, it can be purged or trashed by other cards, but you're running on R&D, and without trashing any cards, you're going to see more cards. And this seems to like directly compete with Medium, and that's not a fight it's going to win. Throwing out 2 cards from your hand to see an additional card, like 2 cards from hand is a pretty steep cost. If you're spending a click to draw a card, you're spending 2 clicks to see an extra card. And sure, you could be running Wildside and stuff like that, but I think if you're in a problem where you have too many cards in your hand and you're like, oh, I have too many cards, maybe I should throw them out anyways, I'd assume you would just play Faust instead, which just seems like a strictly better way of trashing cards from hand. So I'm not actually that impressed with this card. Throwing 2 cards out for seeing an extra card is not particularly impressive. That being said, I've been playing a bunch of decks that use Emptied Mind, this card that this archetype hasn't been fully explored yet, either by I've seen on the internet or by like FFG's card pool. But there was a problem with Emptied Mind decks in which you're holding cards in hand and you're like, oh, I wish I could throw these out of hand so I get my Emptied Mind. And the problem came back to, if that was an issue, you could just play Faust anyways, so that's not that great. Now, I think the only thing compelling about this card itself is that it doesn't have a limit to how many cards you can throw out. And any card that has like unconditional scaling has to be looked at, just because generally at one edge of the possible play space, things get a bit nutty. And the idea with this one is you can throw out like 15 cards from hand or 14 cards from hand and see 8 cards when you access, which is sounding pretty sweet. So how do you do that? I think there's 2 ways to do it. First way is playing Origami, maybe an Origami deck. And Origami is a card I've never seen play, but if you put 3 Origamis down, your hand size is +9, which is pretty good. Maybe you fill your hand and then go run Central Servancy, a bunch of cards. Another really cool thing is if you start your turn with like no cards with Emptied Mind, you'll have 5 clicks this turn. I like this card a bunch. And then you can spend 4 clicks on your turn to draw 10 cards with Duggars, and then you can run R&D or HQ with Severnius, throw out 10 cards, and then see 6 cards, either all of HQ generally or 6 cards from the top of R&D. And that actually could be fun. That's obviously not a sustainable strategy, considering drawing 10 cards a turn is eventually going to end up with no cards left, but I think that might be funny to do. That being said, I don't think this card's very compelling unless you're running like some absurd draw engine. You're not going to get a lot of use out of this compared to how easy it is to use Medium or Nerve Agent, which seems to be generally the better way to multi-access. Let's move on. This is Clan Vengeance, and this is the first clan resource that we've seen. And clan seems to be like from my understanding, it is a new subtype that's going to be at home on in the Red Sand Cycle, and it represents this like anarch type uprising of it's the people on Mars, the Martians versus the like colonialists or colonists, I think is a proper word, I guess, of like security forces and the police and the corporations. So this is the fight on Mars that's currently going on. It's a civil war of sorts from what I understand. And clan resources are meant to be resources that are meant to be destructive. They're meant to benefit off having tags. They're meant to be protective too. And they generally, from what I understand, should be scaling based on how many other clan resources you have on the table. It's also, from my understanding, strictly an anarch thing. So this is our first look at what they could possibly do. And this is Clan Vengeance. It's also 4 influence, which is pretty crazy. It's 3 to install. It's a clan resource, and it reads, whenever you suffer any amount of damage, place 1 power counter on Clan Vengeance. Now, you can trash Clan Vengeance at any time. You can use a paid ability window and trash 1 card from HQ at random for each power counter on Clan Vengeance. So in simplified terms, they hurt you, you hurt them. You basically return the net damage, or meat damage, or I guess brain damage too, in the way they came back. It's important to understand that this card reads, whenever you suffer any amount, only get 1 token. So if someone's hitting you up with like a Scorched Earth that does 4 meat damage, you only get 1 token. So this card's only particularly good, I think, in a deck that does a lot of small damage. And that basically is only a single archetype so far in Netrunner. Things like Jinteki decks that are trying to do what a lot of people refer to as a 1,000 cuts archetype. So things like House of Knives will give 3 counters on Clan Vengeance. Every time you run through a Kagugo, you get a counter on Clan Vengeance. That's okay. I actually think the closest this could be to being useful against any other sort of archetype is if people are playing Builder of Nations, an ID that I haven't seen get a lot of play. But this also technically works well, or Clan Vengeance works well against it. And I don't know, like, I inherently don't like cards that are only good in certain matchups. I don't think it's, like, great design. I don't like this sort of, mentality. And, well, like, most importantly, this card doesn't help you win that much in those situations, I don't think. Like, say that you're playing against a potential Unleashed or a Personal Evolution, and you got 5 tokens on here. You can now trash this, and they throw out their entire hand. That's a fine effect. Like, that's obviously pretty good. If they have snares in hand, you're not going to access them. You're going to throw out maybe they're holding on to neural EMPs. You're going to throw that into the bin, and that could be good. However, of course, you have to understand if you're playing shock, now you have to go dig in there and find their shocks, which might be an issue as well. So there's some plus sides and some negatives to this too. The biggest negative is that this card does nothing in majority of matchups. Like, if you're playing against any Hasbiroid deck, if it's not a brain damage deck specifically, which isn't a very common thing, this card does nothing. Against most NBN decks, this card does nothing. Against most Wayland decks, I also think this card does nothing, because Wayland's the kind of deck that will try and kill you in one big boom, not in small pokes. So there's a lot of matchups that this card does nothing against, and that's obviously a bummer. Now, cards like this are good if you can leverage them on your own terms, and it's actually not impossible considering Anarch specifically is pretty good at punching themselves in the face. These are all the cards that do brain damage, or actually these are all the cards more accurately that have the word brain on them. So something like Amped Up is kind of cool because you gain 2 extra clicks, do 1 brain damage, and technically get a token on Clan Vengeance. So that's like mill 1 card from HQ. Other options like Brain Cage is okay. Skulljack, yeah, it'll get good at some point. Spinal Modem now becomes every time you fail a trace, the corp trashes a card from HQ. Obviously not sustainable, because once you get 6 brain damage, it's generally a good game. And Stim Dealer, or more importantly, Stim Hack, becomes a lot better. There's also, I think, the only other card that does damage to yourself on somewhat your own terms is Mad Dash. And now Mad Dash becomes a bit more destructive to the corpse, which is kind of cool too. But if you just want a card in your deck that just disrupts HQ, and disrupts HQ in every matchup, not just in the matchups that either you're hurting yourself continually, or the matchups that are like Jinteki matchups, I think you can just go from Wanton Destruction, which is a card that I love, and is amazing in so many matchups, and it's not, like, it takes a whole turn, sure, but it's 1 credit. And compare that to this, I'm not that excited about this effect. I don't think it's that great, and it's just going to be a dead card in a lot of matchups. That being said, is that this is the beginning of the clan types. So in the near future, I expect, at least in the cycle, to be more cards that get stronger or benefit you based on how many clan cards you have installed. So there's a big chance that this card will actually become better in the near future. It might become a more reasonable include in some decks. But currently, I'm not that stoked about this. If I wanted to trash cards from HQ, I'd run Wanton Destruction. I'd also just run Maw. Maw is fun. And this is also pretty expensive at 3 credits, which is kind of a bummer. This, on the other hand, is quite a different story. This is Counter Surveillance. This is the 2nd clan card that we have so far, and it's a resource. It's 3 influence, so a bit easier to splash, and it says click and trash, make a run. If successful, instead of accessing, pay X credits to access up to X cards from this server, if able. X is the number of tags you have. So first thing to understand how this card works, you pay 1 when you install it, and then when you make the run, you pay the credits when you're about to access. So you don't pay them up front when you make the run, you pay them when you're right about to access, right when the run's successful, then you have to pay X, and X has to be equal exactly to the amount of tags you have. So if at any point during the run, if you have less money than tags, or you've gained more tags than money, this entirely fizzles and you access no cards. So just be careful about that, because this could fizzle. Also, this is a resource that makes a run, and like a disposable run, like you trash it to make a run, which actually makes this card very comparable to a double event, a double run event. It is a bit different than that, and then I think for a couple reasons. Firstly, you can't recur it with same old thing, because it's technically not an event. I think that's the biggest reason why it's like this. Also, it is a clan resource, so in theory, if you put this on the table before you're going to use it, you might get benefit from other things, so that's kind of okay. But the biggest thing why I think this is super comparable to a clan, or to an event, is that you're not going to leave this on the table. If you're playing Tag Me, the corp is going to trash this, because this card is absurd. So I see this card being played and used in the same turn that it's put down, so I don't see the resource part of it actually being that big of an issue. Now this card, huh? I think this card's really, 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 really good, and it actually might be too good. From my understanding, I'm a bit skeptical, not skeptical about the power of this card, but skeptical of how prevalent this card might become. Skeptical is probably not the right word. This is a really good card. When I learned Netrunner, the magic number that people taught me was 17. The idea was, based off of agenda densities back at that time when I started playing Netrunner back in, I think, 2013. And this might have changed by now due to Global Food Initiative, but based on the numbers that were crunched, I was informed that you need about 17 accesses, discrete different accesses on central servers, to generally have a 50% chance of winning a game of Netrunner. Those numbers obviously might have changed, and strategies and other stuff have changed too. But in normal decks, 17 accesses. This card can give you 17 accesses plus in a single run, and I don't think it's that hard to do it. The idea is that you have a card now that can access the entire deck. The corp's entire deck, sure, entire HQ as well, but the entire R&D, and this card alone seems to be the biggest and strongest win condition of any deck to date, and it's printed on 1 card. This is kind of nuts. So right now, I think the biggest win condition in all of Netrunner is medium, and medium is very different than all the other R&D multi-access cards in the game, because like if you're relying on something like R&D interface, where are we gone? If you're relying on other cards like R&D interface, there's a limit to how much you can see, and if you don't find, if you can't shuffle R&D, or you don't find agendas on top of the deck, you have to wait more turns. And the longer the game goes, the more chances the corporation can pull out of that hole. As opposed to medium, where if you put medium down and the corp is in a bad spot because they don't have enough money, or you trashed all the ice on R&D, you're going to win sooner than later just because you can keep continually seeing more and more cards, and you're kind of not up to card draw. You can close the game on your own terms. And for that reason, medium is incredibly good. This card also doesn't give a shit. You could have the strongest dice you want on R&D. As long as you have many tags, you can run, probably see like, even on a lower case, if you see 7 cards with this, it's super good. But you could see 20 cards with this and just win the game flat out. And it's 1 card. Okay, so how do you do that? You have to get a lot of tags. And I don't think getting a lot of tags is that hard. Classically, the way Netrunner cards have been designed is tags were generally a detriment attached to really good abilities. So the most obvious one is we have Account Siphon here, which is an absurdly good card. It's been around since the core set. And you have a 15 credit swing if this thing fires at best case scenario, and then you take 2 tags. And generally those 2 tags are meant to be a downside, that you'd have to clear the tags, which makes this basically a triple event and 11 credit swing instead of 15. If you're running counter surveillance, you don't give a shit. I think there's actually arguments to fire an Account Siphon and in some cases even just take 2 tags, even if the corp has no money, just because that gives you closer to closing the game out. Like, I think that's obviously not ideal, but I see situations in which that might be an okay play if that's the turn that you're going to counter surveillance to hopefully win, which is kind of nutty. This is a deck called Siphon Wiz, and it's made by and piloted by someone named Bayokin. Bayokin is Benjamin Nee, or Ben Nee, as he's probably more often known. And he's a player from England. He has a YouTube channel, by the way. You might check it out. I'm actually a big fan of it. But he just played at the London Bring a Brit to Worlds tournament and came first place with this wizard deck. And this is an Account Siphon wizard deck. It spends 8 influence on Account Siphons, 2 influence on Planned Assault, which lets you find your Account Siphons if you want, and then runs a bunch of good Anarch stuff, things like Faust, Parasite, and Cipher. So you just siphon them down to the ground and then multi-access and close the game with Keyhole. If they res ice, you trash it. It's obviously very, very good. Interestingly enough, I ran a very similar deck at Canadian Nationals back in 2016. I ran a wizard deck, 2 Account Siphons, a Planned Assault. Cipher wasn't out at that time, and I came second in Canadian Nationals. Like, this is obviously a very, very good deck. And now there's a card printed that you can slot into this deck almost trivially and have such a stronger win condition. Like, this card works in this archetype, and this archetype is already incredibly good. And this deck is like the kind of deck that gets to 15-20 tags at some point in the game, just because they can play Account Siphon, and then they'll play 3 Deja Vus to bring their Account Siphons back, and then 3 Same Old Things to play those 3 Account Siphons back. Like, it's not difficult for them to get a lot of tags by the mid to late game. Also, this is Ben Nee's min-max deck, which he brought to Worlds. And I forgot to mention this when I introduced Ben Nee. He came second at Worlds last year. And this is another deck that runs 2 Account Siphons, 3 Deja Vu, 3 Same Old Thing. And this one in particular also runs Levy Lab Access, so you can refresh all those Account Siphons. And this deck will have 20 to 30 tags at some point in the game. Also, because it is running Joshua B, which is a card that if the corp doesn't trash, you get extra clicks and more tags. You're printing tags, which is obviously something very good. And this deck is a Data Leak reversal deck, so it's a bit different than the wizard deck. But this is a single card that takes the World's second place, and also like by the way, a Data Leak reversal Account Siphon deck won Worlds last year. They just printed a card that makes this archetype have it, like, if they just draw this card at some point in the game after they have 10 tags, they probably won the game. Yeesh. That's an issue. That seems really, really good. Like, really good. I don't get it entirely. There's also other ways to give yourself tags if you want to build around it. At 3 influence, like, this is a steep cost, but I could actually see you including 1 or 2 of these in a Shaper or Criminal deck just because of how strong a win condition this is. If you remember, if you have 20 tags, you see almost all of R&D and all of R&D, and you probably won the game. So these are other cards that give you 1 tag at least. I think I searched take 1 tag. Code Siphon becomes a bit better. John Masanori, while being a resource that won't last around for a long time, can give you tags. Joshua B is really good. I think Maya is the most interesting reason why you might want to play a Tag Me out of Shaper, just because this also makes your multi-access really good, and then later in the game, when you drew your 1 or 2 copies of Counter Surveillance, you just can close the game. That's good. Vamp's also fine. They have no money, you gain credits, and that's just, like, it seems really, really good, and I don't understand why they would print a card like this, considering it just promotes Account Siphon, Data Leak Reversal, and all these sort of things that I know new players struggle against, and a lot of people find to be a negative play experience. Because account siphon is, in a lot of ways, a negative play experience. If you're account siphon to 0 credits, you have no longer any options of what you can do. The only thing you can do is click for credits, and I know a lot of people don't like that. What was I gonna say from this? Yeah, okay, so how do you deal with this? If this is super popular, I think people are gonna have to tech against it. Like, I think you might have to, and there's a couple good options. This is the first one a lot of people might think of, which is closed accounts, and that is admittedly a condition attached to counter surveillance. Is you need a lot of credits. I don't think that's gonna be that hard to do, considering if you're running account siphon, you'll probably have a lot of credits. But if you have 22 tags, you need to do 22 credits for a run, and that's why maybe closed accounts seems good. And one influence, like if this thing catches on, I think one influence in an HB deck and a Wayland deck isn't unreasonable. Just because if you close their accounts, you might have bought yourself some time and their win condition is now off, and now they also have to go to clicking for credits. So maybe you feel a bit good about that. I normally don't talk about spoilers this much on the podcast. This is not a podcast, but I'm gonna have to here. This is officially spoiled by FFG, so I don't feel that bad about this. If you don't want to get some spoilers, avert your eyes and ears for a second, but check this out. This is Mars for Martians. 0 influence event. It'll come out somewhere in the next 2 packs. I think that says 81 on the bottom. But not even reading all the text on this card, just the bottom line. 0 credits. Gain 1 credit for each tag you have. What? Like, that's the easiest combo. Get out all the tags, even if they close your accounts, play Mars for Martians, counter surveillance in. And you probably won the game. This is also, mind you, a 1 influence card. And also will draw you cards. It's a priority, but like, it's not a problem. Like, that's nuts. Now closed accounts at some point won't be like a viable strategy against this, because money's not going to be an issue. If you have 22 tags, they now have an event that says click for 22 tags. So I'm really hoping something comes out in the near future that that punishes tags in a different way. Other things you could do, information overload. Does get a bunch better, because if they hit this, this might wreck their whole rig. Mind you, this doesn't end the run, so if this is on R&D and that's all it's on R&D, counter surveillance will still work. Unless this Trace 1 fires and they don't have the math for it. Thoth, I think it's Thoth, not Toth. Yeah, it's probably Thoth. Thoth now becomes interesting. You have to beat those traces though, which might be hard. But it could be lethal. Data Ward is looking better than ever, also because of the corpse side of this data pack. We'll get to that soon enough, but this card starts to look really good, as do all the other smaller ones like Pachinko, but mostly Data Ward. Like, if people are going tag me, this card becomes super good, because it is really expensive to break. But that's the problem, is like all the cards that I've talked about so far that counter this card are all yellow. They're all NBN cards, and I know a lot of people don't like the fact that, at least at Worlds this year, the top decks were all Anarch and NBN, and they're printing a super good Anarch card, and all the counters are NBN. Like, I don't see how the meta can push out in a different direction at this point. This card's nuts. It's a win condition, like the easiest win condition. It's not hard to take 20 tags. Play Joshua B, play Account Siphon, and that's all you need to do. I can see this card being everywhere for the next little while. Oh boy, it's really good. It's really good. This is Möbius. Möbius is a run event. It's criminal, so play this in Ken Tenma if you want an extra credit. It's also 0 to play, so that looks pretty good. And it says, make a run on R&D. If successful, you may make another run on R&D when this run ends. If the second run is successful, gain 4 credits. And this actually might sound a bit familiar to you, and that's because it entirely is. It entirely is familiar. This is Data Breach. I'm just going to open this up, which is a card that came out, it was last cycle, so it's a bit more than 6 months ago. But this card says, it's also a run event for 0 credits, and it says, make a run on R&D. If successful, you may make another run on R&D when this run ends. Which is the exact, word for word, same text on this card, except this card has another sentence which says, if the second run is successful, gain 4 credits. Both 1 influence, both 0 credit runs, exact same text, except this one is 100% strictly better. How did this happen? How? Why are they doing this? This was, okay, I think it's now like 7 months apart. And I'm not claiming power creep, because I think power creep is only a problem when the card that's been crept from is a good card. But it's not a problem when you reprint a bad card and now it becomes playable enough. Like Neural Katana into Cortex Lock, I think is like fine power creep. And even then, they're different cards, right? They do fundamentally different things on some level. This is the exact same card. but this one's better. And I'm aware one's Shaper, but that also makes this more confusing because they've printed a better version of an R&D card in the faction that's not meant to be good at running R&D. Like, if anything, Data Breach should have been a better version of Möbius because Shapers are good at attacking R&D. While instead they gave us the only R&D card in Criminal? And they're both one influence. What happened? Again, this would be fine if the cards came out like 2 years apart and one of them was going to cycle out soon. So like, we just want to make a strict reprint but make it better. But these came out a cycle apart. This is nuts. And I totally don't understand why this happened. And this upsets me. Like, how do they not? How? Okay. Let's talk about what this card does. This card does everything Data Breach does, but better. And you make a run on R&D, make another run on R&D, gain 4 credits. And making 2 runs on R&D is obviously not good unless you're seeing different cards. And that's possible. That is possible. If your first run on R&D with Möbius sees an agenda, you'll run back and see a new card. That's pretty good. Same thing goes if you trash a card. But more importantly, why I think most people are excited about this is cards like Medium. And I know this is like the 4th time we brought up Medium in this data pack unboxing, but what can you do? It's a good card. If you run with Medium, you see 1 card, then Möbius runs in again and sees 2 cards. So you got a free click, saw an extra card, gain 4 credits, and that seems really good. And I know a lot of people are super excited when this card was spoiled. There was the most conversation, I think, about this card alone on the runner side, which kind of puzzles me because I'm not on board with it at all. In the situation where you have a Medium, oh, well, actually, let's go through the other situations where this works. This also works with things like Top Hat. Top Hat, I think, is easily splashable in Criminal because it is 1 influence, and now you can go see 2 different cards of your choice, sort of like random choice. You don't know what they are. Other cards like Deep Thought are okay. This card's fun. I wish more people played it. Also, of course, if you run things like indexing, you can now stack the deck so you see 2 agendas, and that's pretty good. It's just cards like that. This needs support. Möbius needs support because seeing the same card twice is not good. It's inherently just, it's not great. Now we're talking about a condition. I think this one will most often fire with Medium because Medium does see play in Criminal decks because it is a really strong win condition. But if you're playing Möbius, let's just imagine that there's 1 piece of ice on R&D, and that piece of ice on R&D has it costs 3 credits for you to break. So you run through it, pay 3 credits, see a card with Medium. Möbius runs through it, pays 3 credits, gains 4 credits, and you see another card with Medium. So basically, you got another Medium token for 1 credit, and not playing a click. And that already starts to sound pretty not great, because you have to remember, this is a card slot, mind you. This card does get a bit better with things like Temujin Contract. I don't think it gets particularly better, you just get the money faster, because you're probably going to get the money regardless, but it does get better with things like Desperado, 100%, because now this gives you 2 extra credits, instead of just, or 1 extra credit, right? But the idea is that if you're paying like 3 credits, which isn't unreasonable considering how bad criminals are at breaking stuff, just to get another Medium token, that doesn't seem that hot, because if that was the case, and I've seen people say like, oh, I'd like to play Möbius inside my Anarch deck because it runs Medium. I'll run 3 of Möbius, stuff like that. Like, that doesn't make that sense, because if that's the case, why aren't people playing Surge? For 1 influence, you can import Surge, which just gets you 2 cards on 2 extra counters on your Medium, and you don't have to make a run. You don't have to spend money. You can play this with Parasite. You can play this anywhere. Like, if you're just basing this off of Medium, there's so many better cards you could be going with it. I don't think Surge is that terrible. It's not a good card to include in your deck, but at least it's flexible and makes that Medium play much better. Like, you could play Showing Off. See more cards than Medium if you want to go that way. Heck, play Demolition Run. That's a card that's actually just good. And I spelled it wrong, but the idea is, if you want to set up something good with your Medium, Demolition Run will let you see 4 or 5 new cards. I just don't think this is that great. Like, the money's cool too, the extra free click is cool too, but it's just like, this is a card slot, mind you, and instead of playing this, you could have played a Bank Job. Instead of playing this, you could have played Temujin, and I know you're probably going to play those cards anyways, it doesn't line up to me. Yeah, it really doesn't that much. This card also does get better with Find the Truth, I guess, if you know the top card of R&D, because now you can see 2 cards. But just for a card slot, I don't think this is that compelling. Like, if you just want money and running at the same time, like, you can just play Dirty Laundry, which whenever you draw it is good. And that's the problem with the Möbius, is when you draw this card, say you draw this in the mid-game, this isn't the card you want to draw. Because if you want your thing to be good in Criminal, you need to have your Medium online, you need to be able to break into R&D, it needs to be worth your time and money. And what about if R&D costs more than 5 credits to get into, 4 credits to get into? This card now basically says, get another medium counter, but it won't be as expensive. And if you draw it at any other point in the game where you don't have your medium, it's bad. It's just a dead card. And compare that to Dirty Laundry, which is just 3 credits make a run. Super useful. I don't know. I'm not sold on this. I'm really not. It just seems very hard to get worth out of it. People didn't play Data Breach in Shaper, really. I don't know. Anyways, let's move on. This is Los. This is a data hijacker. No link. He's a Gmod identity, 4515, so pretty standard. And he says the first time the corp reses a piece of ice each turn, gain 2 credits. And that's a cool ability, from code to profit in 3 easy steps. So basically once per turn you can gain 2 credits, and that is very similar to one of the other criminals that I'm very fond of, Gabriel Santiago. And Gabriel Santiago also says a similar idea, but this is the first time he makes a successful run on HQ each turn, gain 2 credits. I think now this does kind of telegraph your play. You're always going to be aggressive on HQ, something most criminals are anyways, but generally against corps, they'll ice HQ first turn, and then you can be super aggressive and they'll res their ice, and that's pretty cool. Los in many ways is very similar to that, except a lot more flexible. Just about every deck runs some amount of ice. I don't know whether the meta right now runs the most pieces of ice, whether you're going to get the most value out of this, but it's definitely something. And you want to be, I think, equally aggressive, because you want the corp to res 1 piece of ice a turn. It's very similar in a lot of ways to Reina Roja. And now you can run HQ, click 1, just like you could in Gabriel Santiago, and they have a choice. It's like, do I res this piece of ice and give them 2 credits, which might be what they need to set up, or do I let them get an access? And that's also the problem with Gabriel Santiago. And I think that's actually really cool, because I miss aggressive criminals where you just want them to face check into everything. Now, admittedly, Los, you get the most value out of Los if you only face check or res 1 piece of ice a turn. So that also might stymie your aggression. Like, you might be like, oh, I ran on HQ, I got 1 free ice res, so I'm not going to run R&D this turn, which might be something that the corp can catch on to and play around that. So it's going to be tricky to get maximum value out of this card without going too slow. This card also like inherently pairs well with all the things that benefit you from resing ice. So Compromised Employee is a really good include. It gives you Pseudo Link, which is pretty good in the meta right now, I think. Gives you more credits whenever any piece of ice is resed, which is pretty sweet. For 1 influence, Ice Analyzer might not be the worst, considering it works well with Los in general and all the other things that I'll bring up in a second, but you gain credits when they res ice. Super good. If you have the MU also, I like this card a lot, and I haven't seen it get a lot of play, but Collective Conscious, you can now res or draw cards when they res ice, and for 2 influence, it might not be absurd. It is 2 MU though. But there's a lot of things you can pair with this. Also, of course, all the D-res effects pair well with this, because at some point, you know, the corp is going to res all their ice, and they'll have only unresed ice, and now your ability is entirely blank, which of course isn't the case with Gabriel Santiago, because HQ will always be there. So what can you do? You have to run D-res effects. Emergency Shutdown's a really good one. Basically target the most expensive piece of ice or an ice on a server that they can't afford to re-res, shut it down. If they re-res it, 2 more credits. So Emergency Shutdown could read, de-res a piece of ice, gain 2 credits in some sort of abstract argument. Other things like Crescentus. Crescentus is an awesome card. Big fan. Same idea, de-res cards. And we also just recently got Exploit, which is looking a lot better with Los. And I'm surprised Los isn't in the art. Or is that Los? No, that can't be Los, right? That doesn't look at all like him. But this card also, in some ways, means that D-res up to 3 pieces of ice gains 6 to more credits if you run like all this collective, if you run like Compromise Employee and all this stuff. And this card's looking a lot better. And that's kind of cool. Now, the way things go generally in these cycles is for a new archetype, so this sort of D-res archetype, all the cards haven't come out yet, and you have to wait till the end of the cycle to get all the things that go with Los as of now. And I've seen cards coming out in the future in terms of spoilers, and there's a lot of cool cards coming out that will make Los better and better. Specifically, I haven't seen this card, but I'm expecting him to get a console that deals with D-resing or resing at some point in the near future, and that's going to make this idea a lot better. So inherently there is kind of a problem where IDs and archetypes aren't that exciting until later on in the cycle, which is a bit of a bummer if you want to play Los now. But I think you can make Los fine. Like Los will get you money throughout a game, and if that's not, like, it might not be interesting because you can't put cool cards in your deck to like really dig into that idea, it'll at least give you money, which is a pretty okay thing to do. Another thing, of course, that goes well with Los is the pair. I'm just gonna write golden because that's easier to spell. Is these bird breakers. These bird breakers, mind you, pay 2 credits to return the card to your grip and then de-res whatever you've broken with them. The sentry, barrier, code gate based on which bird you have. And now that means the card's de-resed, so if they want to re-res it, you'll get the 2 credits back and it basically refunds the de-res cost. Of course, you have to reinstall the breaker, which is kind of a bummer considering they're super expensive, but that's why I think running that I forget the name already, but that resource that gives you credits to install cards is starting to look better. Ice Analyzer. Yeah, that makes these look better. One thing I find that though clumsy about is that these breakers belong to Khan. And Khan was meant to be the criminal ID that's really into de-resing stuff. Now she's 12 influence, smaller deck though, but the idea between like Los and Khan is if you want to use the bird breakers, Khan saves a credit and a click to reinstall the breakers, while Los just saves 2 credits. And if you're using the bird breaker suite, like these 2 runners become very comparable in non-interesting ways. Like Khan's ability just says, like Khan's ability at some point doesn't matter. I don't know. It just, with the bird breakers, I'm pretty sure the argument is whether 2 credits is better than a credit and a click on savings. And I'm not sure, but these just feel so similar, which is not cool considering they came out so close together. But yeah, that's largely Los. Be aggressive, run early. I like this ID because it's not like compared to some of the other criminal IDs. It's really good to start with this one as opposed to starting with Andromeda and rebirthing into it. Just because turn 1 you might want to face check and get your 2 credits worth. And 2 credits worth is good money. That's Los. I think Los will be fine. This is System Seizure. It's a current event and it's a Shaper current event, which is something that's always good to see. It costs nothing. And it has a basic current text, and its ability says, the first icebreaker, whose strength you increase each turn, does not return to its base strength until the end of the run. And it's 1 influence. Cool, so the best part about this card, like, almost 100%, regardless of its effect, is that it is the second Shaper current. The distribution of currents has been super bad, I think. Like, I think Anarch has 4 or 5 currents right now, and the vast majority of them are, like, tournament competitive playable quality. Criminal has 1 current that is largely not great. Shaper has 1 before this, which was largely not amazing either. So if you're generally packing currents in your deck, you're either packing Anarch currents or you're packing neutral currents. And it's really good that Shaper actually gets a current, let alone it's 1 influence so you can splash it, let alone it's free so you can just play it to turn off a corp current, but it's actually like pretty okay. So that's good to see because all the currents being Anarch was kind of nuts. So this basically makes any breaker of your choice, well, the first one you use, so sometimes that's not your choice, into a Gordian Blade or Houdini or any of the other breakers that have a similar ability, plus 1 strength for the remainder of this run. And that could actually give you some sort of economic savings. It's obviously not good if you're running Gordian Blade or Houdini because there's a chance you're double dipping and this event will just like fizzle, or the effect will fizzle because you're using a code gate anyway. So I think this is generally best when you're using it with like a sentry breaker or a barrier breaker. This also gets much better if the meta is more glaciary and you're actually breaking servers with 4 or 5 pieces of ice, and that actually isn't really the meta right now. Most decks are running ice light and not that many pieces of ice, so this might actually not be amazing right now, but at some point if we go back to a glacier archetype, if that becomes popular in a corp side, this is going to be worth its salt. Right now, not entirely sure if it is. What kind of things can we boost with this? I think if we want to go on the sentry side, it's actually pretty good with stealth. Just because stealth breakers are pretty hungry on stealth credits, and now you can spend 1 credit to boost the Switchblade, and it will have its stealth credits until the end of the run, so you can save some stealth credits, and that seems pretty okay. If you want to run some subpar breakers, I think you might be able to get away with it now. As long as, that's the problem, it's like as long as the ice is on the outside, so it's like easy for the, well not easy, but the corp can play around it. So if you want to run Pipeline for some reason, and this card actually has been seeing more play with Cipher being around, you can now boost, oh wait, no, Pipeline already does this. Okay, great. Maybe you want to run the Shaper Stealth Breaker, what is it called? Houdini? No, I don't know what it is. Okay, there's a Shaper Stealth Breaker, it's like 3 credits to boost 4 strength or something like that. So maybe you want to do that once. I know decks aren't running a lot of, it's a black something? Not Black Cat. I forget what it is. That's not the point. Excuse me. I think this card's probably the best with AI breakers. Firstly, Faust. You can now like trash 2 cards, 1 card with Faust, and you have a 4 strength Faust for the remainder of the run. And that's obviously good because if you're using Faust, you might be using it for everything on the server, so this will actually save you a bunch of cards, and that's good. Like, this card gets worse, I think, if you have multiple breakers, because the chance of it lining up and being good, like the outside ice on the server that you want to get into, actually you have to matter to boost the strength permanently. Like, there's a lot of conditions for that to line up and be good, but if you're running AI breakers, who gives a shit? Right? Like, now Faust is strength 6, good. It's going to be strength 6 for all the ice on that server, and that actually might save you in the long run. You can also do things like Overmind. Seems okay. Overmind generally is taxed out, not so much by strength, but more about counters, so maybe that's not amazing. I guess you can go Crypsis now, and spend once boosting Crypsis at the beginning, and you have a Crypsis for the whole server. Maybe that's good. I don't know. Crypsis still has problems dealing with multiple pieces of ice. And I think that's most of the AI that this matters about. I guess you could run Brahmin, and also the other, the Fractor. Anyways, but yeah, Brahmin now, because it has a pretty bad ratio to boost, you can boost it a bunch. You're still gonna have to like put things on top of your deck, but maybe this gets better. Point being is that if you have one breaker that you use for everything, this card gets a lot better. If you're using multiple breakers, it actually can be pretty clumsy, and there's a lot of situations in which it might do nothing. Yeah, because it depends on a lot of things. So yeah, I'm not excited. The fact that it is just a fine, like, it's a fine enough current if you have if you're dealing with big servers, and right now that might not be the thing. Now, this is another card that I actually think has bad formatting on it. This one says the first icebreaker strength you increase does not return until the end of the run. And I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but you can actually boost icebreakers outside of a run. And in a lot of situations, or actually, no, in some situations that's very beneficial, but so I would assume that this card should have said the first icebreaker whose strength you increase during a run does not return to base strength until the end of that run, but it doesn't say that. So this is something that need clarification on the UFAQ, and even with the clarification on the UFAQ, I'm not entirely sure how it works. Mind you, this is the UFAQ. This comes up every time we do unboxing just because it's super important. In fact, you can't play Netrunner really without this, which is an issue because it's unofficial. Oh, by the way, 1 month into Sync BRE Watch. Well, System Seizure is active. How long does the strength boost of an icebreaker last if the boost it's outside of a run? And it says that the boost, if you boost it outside a run, the strength resets immediately, just like Gordian Blade. While that does make sense, like if you boost Gordian Blade, it's not going to keep its strength. This one specifically says keep the strength until the end of the run. And if you, it seems like bad formatting. Does not return to its base strength at the end of the run. And if you're not during the run, what is the run? You see where there's a problem here? I'm not a big fan of that. And I think this is, like, the person who wrote this did not consider that situation. And I'm aware Gordian Blade says the same thing. It just says the run, but I don't know. So maybe that does hold its salt. I just don't think that's as clearly explained as it should be. Anyways, this is Customized Secretary. This is a program. It's a Shaper program. It's 1 MU, 2 to install, only 2 influence. It says when you install Customized Secretary, reveal the top 5 cards of your stack. You may host any number of revealed programs from your stack on it. Shuffle your stack. And now as a click, you can install a hosted program paying all install costs. This is another Liga art, and it's just absolutely fantastic. I'm a big fan of this art. If this goes on playmat, I'm pretty happy. Alright, so play this card. Reveal the top 5 cards of your deck. So you reveal all of them, even if they're not programs. That means you have to show the corporation what's in your deck, which is technically not a great thing to be doing. And then you may host any number of those cards. So you can actually decide, I don't want some of these programs underneath this thing, and then you put all those cards back and you shuffle them. Yeah, that's how that works. And that's weird. Like, this falls somewhere inside the Shaper identity of being able to play cards, like be able to creatively answer problems and solutions. But it does it in a way that I would actually consider being a lot worse than a lot of the other options. Firstly, you're revealing all the cards that are underneath Customized Secretary, which in some cases is good, in some cases it's bad. And the fact that this takes a click action, it's not an instant ability to pull the cards underneath it, you're not going to be able to react during a run or react quickly or on the corpse turn to certain things that you need to react to. And that's kind of been the strength of Shaper and why self-modifying code is such a good card. With self-modifying code, You can pay 2 credits to find any card from your deck and install it, and you can do that at instant speed. So the idea is if you're running a server, the corporation reses a big piece of ice like an archer, you can pull out your breaker, you can pull out your sharpshooter. While if that card is underneath customized secretary, you're boned. You have to pre-install it before running, and that's kind of not as great as self-modifying code. Admittedly, self-modifying code you can only use once before you have to clone chip it back if you want to use it, and this could have multiple cards underneath it. But it just removes the fun part of Shaper, which is being able to react on the run or like just in any sort of exciting way. And this just is like, okay, now I have access to my cards, now I can install them. Also, install a hosted program paying all install costs means that I don't think you get your refund from playing Kate. So you're just going to pay the full cost. So that's a bit of an anti-synergy. You also can't crack this like you can crack self-modifying code on your own turn. So you can't get more benefit out of this with Haley getting a double install. Like that's not great either. So what this card basically does, it's a pseudo draw card. I don't actually think it works well in the cool, fun Shaper tricks. It's just a pseudo draw card. And the chance is like this is, I think, worse than a draw card in a lot of ways. Sure, you don't have to keep cards in hand, but like you're not guaranteed to get those cards. Like you could fizzle fire this and in theory find no programs. And I don't think it's good to put this in a deck that doesn't run a lot of programs. And if you're running a deck with a lot of programs, I think this makes the most sense in Professor. Just because this will fire and you'll get all your cool options underneath there, and that's kind of fun. But if you're running this in a deck, like a Shaper deck that runs like 8 or 9 programs, there's a chance that this doesn't like get that much. So you're paying 2 credits to see 2 cards and put them underneath this thing. Also, they're underneath this thing, so if the corp trashes this card, those cards go too. And it just, I don't know, like compare that to Quality Time. And Quality Time costs 1 credit more, but it just puts 5 cards in your hand. You don't have to show them to the corporation, and now they're in your hand. So you can play them if they're like Sure Gamble or Resources or what have you, as well as just playing the cards underneath it. I don't know. I'm not like this doesn't seem that exciting. And there's also clumsiness here. Like say you're running, and this comes with the whole idea of you not being able to use it immediately. Like if your Clot is underneath there, firstly the corp knows your Clot is underneath there, and you can't pull it out as a reaction. I think if you find Clot, you choose to not put it under this card. You just reveal and you choose, no, I'm not gonna put that under. You shuffle your stack. I'm just not entirely sure what you need to do with this. This I see actually might be like okay in a deck like Noise. I guess you could play this for 2 influence, and it's like a pseudo draw card. You can take 5 of your viruses to put underneath there, and then click to install a virus to get a mill. Something like that seems actually okay. You also can't reuse this card. Like once it's dead, which is kind of a bummer, and that's 2 influence. But like that's kind of deck that I think this works well with. The kind of deck that's like installing a lot of cheap programs to sell them to the pawn shop, stuff like this, because I think that might be the easiest way to get a lot of things underneath this. And then at the end of the turn, you can, at the end of like its use, you can always pawn shop this. Also, mind you, it takes MU, so you gotta be careful for that. Yeah, it's a weird card. Like it doesn't help that much with the on reaction Shaper stuff that Shapers normally do, but it lets you get a lot of things underneath it quickly. It's not gonna trash anything that it doesn't get, which is great too. But I don't see myself playing this as opposed to just like playing a Diesel or playing a Quality Time. Maybe I'll try it out with a lot of small things in pawn shop. This is the last card, and this is build script, and this is a bit of a circus. So it's a 0 cost event. I love that art, and it says gain a credit and draw 2 cards. Sounds okay. This card's 1 influence. All right. Before discussing what this card does, we gotta look at another card. This is Deuce's Wild. Deuce's Wild is the first card of, I think it's going to be 2, that was designed by world champion Dan D'Argenio, a man who's won the Netrunner World Championship 2 years in a row. And that's him. That's what Dan looks like. And this card is also 1 influence. And let's read what it does. Play it for 2 credits, so it's more expensive. And you can choose 2 of the following and resolve them in any order. Gain 3 credits, which is akin to gaining 1 credit. Drawing 2 cards. Or doing all this other cool stuff, like removing a tag or exposing a piece of ice and then making a run. Build script is Deuce's Wild that is super limited. It's just a 100% worse version of Deuce's Wild. They're both 1 influence. Deuce's Wild does cost money to play, while build script you can technically play from 0. Don't think that's a real benefit, considering if you're drawing cards when you're at 0 credits, kind of not much you can do with them. And of course, if you're running Deuce's Wild, you could also play it with prepaid voice pad and in theory make more money with it, an option that you don't have with build script. Deuces Wild is a 100% better version of this card. So what happened? There was actually a pretty interesting thread on Facebook when these cards were revealed. Dan D'Argenio made a post there and said like, "Yo, FFG, what the heck happened? How could you have printed this card? I designed a better version of this card. What are you doing?" And Damon Stone actually responded to that and said like, "Hey, sorry, Dan, we tried to tell you when you designed this card that we had something similar coming out. Sorry, you should talk to Lucas Litzinger. It's on him." I'm not sure if Lucas responded to it, but Dan responded to that being like, "Are you kidding? That's absurd. How could you possibly do that? I'm so sorry that I designed," like I'm assuming sarcastically, "I'm so sorry I designed a card that you designed. That's my fault. I apologize." And that's absolutely nuts. This is a prize. This is one of the prizes you get for winning worlds, is they let you design a card. There are limitations. They'll work with you. Can't design an identity, but you get to design your card. And Dan wanted to do this card. And it's important to understand that the cards, Netrunner cards, are designed and tested and all that about a year to 2 years in some cases before they actually come out. So this card was probably in design, if not play tested, before Dan D'Argenio was, like about the time where Dan D'Argenio won Worlds and was designing his card. And so Dan said, "I want to make this card." They okayed it. Maybe they did warn him like, "Hey, we have a similar card coming out," but they didn't change their card. Like, I think Dan's in the right here. I think if you win Worlds, you should design their card. And then if the people at FFG been like, "Oh, we're basically printing out a very similar card 2 years from now," they should change theirs. Because this is absurd. They basically, like, out of the 20 cards in this pack, this card you can basically rip up. If you have Deuces Wild, there's almost no reason to run this. It's 100% a worse version. And let alone, I don't think you'll spend 6 influence on including 3 copies of each of these cards. Like, this is honestly crazy. How did this happen? That they're like, "Yeah, well, we printed Deuce Wild," and this came out like what, 2 years ago? And no, a year ago, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll still print build script. It's the worst version of a card we printed 2 years ago, but it's fine." And they're also in the same like cycle. Like, these cards will always be in tournament play at the same point in time, I'm pretty sure. So it's not like one of them's not going to exist at a point, and this will be like the worst alternative that's left over. It's crazy. It's honestly nuts. I think it's kind of disrespectful to Dan, but most importantly, this is just a dead product. And he paid money for this card, right? Alright, on its own, build script, gain a credit, draw 2 cards. Not very exciting, especially for one influence. Drawing 2 cards, you have to understand about a draw card is that if you play this card, the cards that you're drawing are replacing this card. So in some ways, this card's very similar to draw 1 card, just because instead of drawing this one, you could have drawn the card that this card would have drawn you. I know that's a bit not worded amazingly, but that's the idea. Is you have to understand, if this was card A and you played to draw B and C, if this card just wasn't in your deck, you would have just drawn B and C. I could see how that's a bit of a fallacious argument, but it's draw cards replace themselves, and the card replacing itself for 1 credit is just not good enough. It's not great, and every ID has a card that draws more than 2 cards. Every ID, every like faction, not ID. So I don't know. The only use I could see possibly of this card is if you're playing a deck like that involves Comet, just because it's a cheap event that you can basically staple to any of the other events you played this turn. So it's like, oh, I played Build Script, I drew into another event, I played it. But at that point, I'd just much rather play Diesel. I'd much rather play Deuces Wild because it's inherently better. And I'm not going to be spending 6 influence on Deuces Wild and Build Script. This is just super disappointing. Why would they do this? They printed a strictly worse version of a card that they've printed before. And like, that's the opposite of power creep, which is not a thing that games usually run into, but we've got it here. Anyways, that's the runner side of this pack. Looking back, there's not a lot of really good stuff here. I think Los is cool, and I think Counter Surveillance is going to be an issue. Like, this card seems so easy to abuse. 1 card win condition seems to be problem. Not 1 card win condition. It's attached to Count Siphon and Joshua B, but that might be a thing. And then a lot of things that are just, I don't think that interesting. And then a lot of like, this is still going on. There's a lot of like weird templating and like misspelling and just, I don't know. It's going to be a weird cycle. Thanks so much for watching. I think that was a bit on the longer side. Apologies for that. But stay tuned next or tomorrow. We'll have the corpse side of this pack, which has 11 cards in it. And hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. Ciao.